Honorable the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, amen, namaste.
Oath or affirmation announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, I have received communication from Mr. Prakash Ramada, MP, member for St. Augustine, who has requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the member seeks is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 1, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 20th report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2017. Paper number 2, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to the 14th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination into the construction, maintenance, and refurbishment of state-owned or state-funded housing projects and units. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the annual report of the Strategic Services Agency, Ministry of National Security for the year 2017.
Reports from committees.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs on a critical assessment of the waste management policies and initiatives of the state with specific focus on solid waste.
Member for Diego Martin, North East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to present the interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018.
Prime Minister's questions.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister, given the Prime Minister's public commitment of a thorough investigation into the recent incident in which 3 persons were killed and 3 persons were injured in an alleged gun battle between the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and residents of Big Yard, Carenage, could the Prime Minister inform this House when will the investigation into the said incident commence?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, if my colleague from Couva South was so noticeable and caring about the people of Carenage and Big Yard, he would have heard the Commissioner of Police in response to this very question say that an investigation has already commenced and that an officer who is named, has been put in charge of the required investigation. So I know of no reason why this question should be before the House today.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, given the concerns of the residents of Carnage about the independence of the inquiry, could the Prime Minister, as head of the National Security Council, inform this House who is the officer that will be leading this investigation?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, an officer, Samaru, has been identified by the authorities in the police service, and I expect that given the nature of the incident, that following the appropriate protocols, that the Police Complaints Authority would get involved, and that this investigation is not unique, but we expect that it would be done in a way that would be covered by the laws of Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, given the recent loss of a full electricity supply at the San Fernando General Hospital, could the Prime Minister inform this House if all electrical systems, including the supply of power at our nation's hospitals, have been reviewed?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have no information that all electrical systems in all hospitals have been reviewed, and there's actually, I know of no incident that would require that all electrical systems in all hospitals be reviewed. What I do know is that there's an ongoing arrangement of maintenance and observation, and insofar as electrical issues arise, they will be dealt with in a professional manner by the professionals in the Ministry of Health, and that is what I am aware of.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So is the Prime Minister telling this House that given what happened at the San Fernando General Hospital on the 25th of April 2019 is not important to warrant a review of all the systems from an electrical point of view at our nation's public hospitals?
Stop.
Madam Speaker, the authorities at the various hospitals, which are physical buildings quite unconnected across the country, from Tobago to Arima to Port Fortin, San Fernando, the protocols for maintenance of electrical supplies and service are in place and being observed by the professionals within the Ministry of Health, Madam Speaker, and there's no panic station. And as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, in response to this kind of approach being advocated, that the Ministry of Health had already indicated how San Fernando was dealt with, what the nature of the problem was, and there's no need for panic stations.
Supplemental member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is the Prime Minister not concerned that the backup generators didn't function, which put lives of citizens at risk? And at least in the maintenance schedule that you described, there ought to be an assurance that there's a backup capability.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is precisely what I speak to when I speak about the professionals ensuring that electrical supplies and services are available and that the systems are acceptable.
Member for Barataria-Sanu and supplemental.
Prime Minister, supplemental. Are you saying that the professionals are now there seeing about it and they weren't there in the past?
Prime Minister.
I am not saying that at all. This happened many, many days ago and have been responded to a long time ago. This is old news.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Madam Speaker, could the Prime Minister assure this House and by extension the nation that in relation to the generators at our public hospitals, the fuel supply will be guaranteed to last, God forbid, days rather than hours in a particular situation?
I'm not going to allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 3 to the Prime Minister. Given the recent reports that Shell and Heritage Exploration Limited have signed a memorandum of understanding for a possible joint venture, could the Prime Minister state the process which was adopted to select Shell as a partner in this joint venture?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the process is the same one that I met when I became Prime Minister and that this government came into office. that Shell was in partnership with Petrotrin. Contrary to the insinuation of this question, it is good for the public to be aware that Petrotrin and Shell are in an ongoing partnership of long standing, Shell having bought the assets of BG. As a result of which, that partnership sees Petrotrin and Shell operating the Hibiscus platform and owning and operating the pipeline from the NCMA to Point Lisas, to Point 14. This MOU to work with Petrotrin on a matter of seismic observations and exploration potential of the southwestern peninsula, Soldado Field or elsewhere, is simply a continuation of that partnership which exists as a result of Shell buying the assets of British Gas.
Member for Point of Peer.
Question number 4 to the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister.
Given the recent reports which stated that Petrotrin made a profit after tax of 1.6 billion TT dollars in its last year of operation, could the Prime Minister confirm the validity of these reports and specifically state what was the profit of Petrotrin in its last year of operation?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, much as I would like to assist my colleague in getting the information he seeks, I would be very appreciative if he could identify any particular report to which this question refers.
Supplemental, member for Point of Peer.
Madam Speaker, the supplementary to the Prime Minister, the report was stated in the media that Petrotrin made a profit before tax of $1.6 billion. It was stated throughout the media, and that was the report.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, if the media reports, the unspecified media report is the basis of this question, I simply want to tell my colleague from Point of Peer that that is simply spreading misinformation, and he's well aware that the government documents and the parliamentary reports covering Petrotrin's operations are not to be found in misinformation in the media. Madam Speaker, the only reports that I know of is that Petrotrin showed a loss operation in the last year of its operations and the year before. And we have spoken at length about Petrotrin's loss-making arrangements in this House and outside of it. And Madam Speaker, the situation with Petrotrin's last year accounts as of today, those audited accounts are not available to the board as yet. So I don't know what could be the possible source of any information that is credible about Petrotrin having made a profit of 1.6 billion. This is misinformation and political mischief, because what it's trying to do is to make the political case being made by the UNC that there was no reason to close the refinery because the company was making a profit. That is misinformation and political mischief.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Prime Minister, it was stated in the media with the CEO of Heritage Petroleum that this $1.6 billion in profit before tax was used as a tool for the CEO in presenting to the international arena in refinancing the bonds of Petrotrin.
Madam Speaker, just for your benefit, because stick breaking the airs, right? Petrotrin did not make a profit of $1.6 billion in 2018. The reported $1.6 billion applies only to the exploration and production side of the company. It does not take into account the massive losses of the refinery or payments of royalties, financing, payments, depreciation, etc. With all of these things are taken into account, Petrotrin made a huge loss in 2018. And that is the fact.
Member for Tabakit.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister inform this House whether the government intends to complete the segment of the highway from David to Mondesi, and if so, what is the time frame for completion of the same?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, at this time, and for the last 2 years and 2.5 years, the government has been focusing on the primary purpose of that highway, which was to get a main artery going from north to south all the way to Point 14. The spur off into Mondesi and into into Debe Mondesi is not the main route of the artery to Point 14. On restarting this project, the resources and the effort have been focused on getting the highway to Point 14. On completion of that, Madam Speaker, we will then turn our attention to other spurs off the main route. We are back to the original program, which is to build a main highway from San Fernando directly to Point 14.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Prime Minister, could the Prime Minister inform the House from whom have the major portions of land been acquired and at what costs for the construction of the Valencia to Toco Highway?
Stop.
Madam Speaker, the major portions of lands to be acquired, if and where lands are to be acquired for the Valencia to Toco Highway, have not been undertaken at this time. The process is underway to get to that stage. But what I want to tell my colleague from Caroni East, the one thing that you could be assured of is that major or minor acquisition on this highway, the taxpayers can rest assured that there will be no squandermania and lawyer enriching as happened on the highway from San Fernando to Point 14 that happened under the last government, where land acquisition was one of the source of rape of the treasury in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you. Would the Prime Minister give this House the assurance that none of his parliamentary colleagues will benefit from the acquisition of these lands, even at this stage?
I mean, unlike that?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, what I can guarantee is that none of my parliamentary colleagues, whoever they might be, wherever they might have property, will be treated as differently from other citizens whose property might be acquired. But I tell you, we will not set out as a government to undertake administration in such a way as to deliberately benefit members of this House. If he knows of members of this government who have land to be acquired, he's a better informed man than I am. I know of no such instance. But I'll tell you one thing. It is not the policy of this government to continue the policy of the last government, where members of the government and their friends use land acquisition to enrich themselves, and when I stop on that.
Member for Orokuch East.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Prime Minister for the disclosures. Could the Prime Minister indicate, I heard something about the rape, but I didn't understand what you were talking about, but you may know about that. Could you indicate whether the lands would be by compulsory acquisition or private treaty or a mix of both?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is a question which I cannot answer at this time because we deal with the policy is to use the Land Acquisition Act, but on a case-by-case arrangement, there may be instances where private treaty is used, but private treaty will not be used to bring about the rape of the treasury, if that's what you don't understand. Rape of the treasury is something that everybody understands.
Member for Naparima. Order. Member for Naparima.
Would the Prime Minister give the assurance that if rape or no rape, that a member of cabinet stands to gain, that he will recuse himself from the discussions of cabinet?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that is standard protocol observed by this government under this administration. That is standard practice to be expected. If there's a conflict at the point of the decision making, every member, not only in this House, but public officers or any other citizen, wherever there's a conflict, one is required to recuse oneself from the decision making. This government observes that protocol.
Member for Caroni East.
Standing Order 48-4. Madam Speaker, Standing Order 48-4. Yes. The Prime Minister is obsessed with this rape and rape and rape, and it is unparliamentary to speak like this.
Member for Caroni East.
I wanted a supplemental, Madam Speaker. Yes. Yes. Would the Prime Minister indicate, since you made the statement that no land has been acquired so far, the 400 million for the cost of the highway, would that be separate from the acquisition of properties?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I am not sure what he's talking about because he's not specific. Throwing out a figure of 400 million, I don't know what he's talking about. And if he is more specific, I might be able to assist.
You mentioned?
Member for Carinese, the question has been answered. New question.
To clarify, Madam Speaker, so I'm clarifying my question.
Member for Carinese, we move on to the next question, please.
I thought he was asking for a clarification. Question number 7 to the Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister state why there has been no forensic audit into the widely reported AV drilling oil issue with Petrotrin?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is yet another attempt by my colleagues to confuse the public. You may recall, Madam Speaker, that upon their platform shouts about AV drilling, Petrotrin, which is the company that was responsible for public assets in this particular matter, conducted thorough investigations using foreign expertise, more than one level, produced a body of information, all of which the nation was advised through this parliament has been placed into the possession of the Director of Public Prosecution to determine whether any wrongdoing took place and who is accountable. Petrotrin concluded this process not only by using the technical expertise, but senior counsel to collate and respond to the allegations. And all of those matters, all of those documentation, all of those reports are in the possession of the Director of Public Prosecution. And I want to add, Madam Speaker, contrary to what is being said by my colleagues on the other side, this particular matter is currently in arbitration between AV Drilling and Petrotrin, where contractual liabilities are to be determined, Madam Speaker. And I wish that they could keep the platform talk outside of the House and let the public understand how the public business is being held with. AV Drilling and Petrotrin are to arbitrate over liabilities within the contract of that arrangement. And if there's any criminal conduct, that is in the hands of the Director of Public Prosecution at this time.
The member for Napari.
Prime Minister, that you seem to be intimately involved in the discussions and the arbitration. If this came to cabinet, would you recuse yourself? Would you recuse yourself from discussions because the person is your friend?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, the first thing, I want the record to be clear. I never said about being involved in any form with any arbitration. All I have mentioned for the public benefit, those who believe that somebody has something to answer for with AV drilling, just let the public know that Petrotrin and AV drilling are arbitration where matters are to be determined as to who owes who what. That's a fact. Has nothing to do with me. And secondly, if my colleague from Naparima knows of any reason why I should recuse myself in this matter as head of this government, get up and say so in this House. And better still, come outside and say it in silence.
Member for Caroni is supplemental. Member for Caroni is supplemental. Order, please.
Honorable Prime Minister, with the dissolution of Petrotrin, could you, with what you just said, give some undertaking that circumstantial evidence would still be available for the Director of Public Prosecutions to work with, or some of the evidence would have been destroyed as a result of the dissolution of Petrotrin?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker,
Petrotrin was not dissolved.
Petrotrin has not been dissolved. We have told this country, contrary to the confusion being created by our colleagues on the other side, Petrotrin still exists as the company with all the legacy items of the original company. So all matters of this and similar nature, which Petrotrin was involved in the creation of the new companies, those matters remain with Petrotrin. They are called legacy items. Preserved. And I simply want to say that they are preserved for all actions which would have been taken even if we had not restructured the company. And I want to also point out that the same DPP who conducted his business the way he had done last week and is doing it today and going forward, is the same DPP that has in his possession all the information concerning this matter. And that I say to the public. And I simply want to ask the public to disregard my colleagues on the other side who seem to have a different story.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Prime Minister, with respect to your clear distinction between the matter being subject of arbitration for contractual liabilities and so on the one hand, and receiving the attention of the DPP and other law enforcement for criminal action on the other hand, would the Prime Minister indicate whether the government will also be prepared to hire first-in-class forensic experts out of the United Kingdom to also investigate and assist law enforcement on the AV drilling fake oil matter?
Madam Speaker, I don't know what they're so jumpy about, you know. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has already done that and put within the police service the competence and expertise to treat with this and all other matters. And this is the first time that that has happened in this country. And that may very well be the source of his unease.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, the decision by the board to enter into arbitration with AV drilling, was that taken without reference to the line minister? The decision to enter into discussions without reference to the line minister or the cabinet of Trinidad?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, that question defies an understanding of logic and truth. AV drilling and petrotrin are in a contractual arrangement. The decision to go into arbitration is not a capricious matter requiring the minister. AV drilling initiated under the terms of the contract arbitration proceedings, which Petrotrin under law is cooperating with. This is a contract between two parties. And contrary to the mischief that you all have been making, these are the facts. And facts are stubborn things. This is not being created on this side of this government, you know. The contract requires arbitration triggered by one party. And if you know another route, then get up and say so.
Member for Cardi Central.
Question to the Honorable Prime Minister. Could the Prime Minister inform this House whether he is in agreement with the invasion of citizens' private properties by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service without the provision of search warrants as reported by some homeowners?
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, once again, I want to draw the attention of my colleague to the statement made by the Commissioner of Police, who is the authority governing the conduct of police investigations and police officers on investigations. Madam Speaker, it is not for me to intervene in the police work with respect to specific matters of law enforcement on matters which the Commissioner has said at the appropriate time he will clarify for the public. But let me say this. Provision is made for entry into premises by way of warrant. But there's also provision being made for police to conduct their police work under existing law where a warrant may not be necessary at the point in time when a particular action is being taken. And I would simply ask my colleague to await the details of the Commissioner of Police and don't invite me into the policing from which the government, the executive, is excluded.
Supplemental, Member for Ganga Central.
I appreciate the Prime Minister's response. But as you know, the Commissioner of Police is still subject to a Minister of National Security.
Is that the question?
No, I'm preambling my question.
Okay, ask the question, please.
And what I am concerned about, you're having said that there are alternatives besides a warrant, whether there was a legal basis on which the police entered the property.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, What is my colleague inviting me into? My colleague is an experienced member of government. He must know the limit within which the executive can intrude into law enforcement at the personal operational level.
The Constitution provides.
There is clear route where the police can act or cannot act. And to protect the citizenry, there's a provision where warrants are sought on cases presented. But that is not the only way the police can act under specific circumstances protected under existing law. It is quite wrong for my colleagues to go out there and tell the population that we have created new law allowing this to happen. Madam Speaker, this is mischief of the worst kind, creating hurt in our population, and I appeal to my colleagues to stop doing what you are doing.
Supplemental, member for Caroni East. Member for Caroni East.
Honorable Prime Minister, as head of National Security Council, are you comfortable in your own mind that 7 homes have been invaded without any evidence of any warrant whatsoever? Are you comfortable in your own mind?
I won't allow that as a supplemental question. It is the question that has been originally asked. Member for Naparima, supplement.
Is the Prime Minister not concerned that the timing of these raids so close to an election could give the impression to right-thinking citizens that they are political?
Prime Minister.
So stop law enforcement.
Madam Speaker, I simply want to give my colleague from Naparima and all his colleagues on the other side the assurance that no aspect of law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago is governed by any election or perceived election. Law enforcement is 24/7 every day of the year in this country. And if you have, there's no timetable about elections. And once again, it is mischievous to be countenancing and putting it out that law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago is governed by elections.
All of a sudden.
Madam Speaker, as far as I'm aware, we are under criminal attack in this country from the criminal element, and it has nothing to do with the election date. It has to do with law enforcement under the country's constitution. And the people who are to do that, do so under the expectation that they'll protect and serve. It is mischievous to be talking about elections. Why don't these are questions
approved by the Speaker? Member for Oropuchis, kindly take a seat. Member for Caroni Central, supplemental. Excuse me.
Did
One
I?
minute. Excuse me. Excuse. I have not recognized you, member for Caroni East. Member for Digo. Just 1 minute, please. Member for Digo Martin, notice, I heard that. I would ask you, since it's early, one, to get up, withdraw and apologize, and secondly, hereafter, try your best to contain those outbursts. Prime Minister and all members, Prime Minister and all members, it may be very difficult for us sometimes to contain ourselves, but in here, we have to summon all our strength.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I apologize and withdraw that remark.
So, member for Caroni Central.
Yes, Prime Minister, did I understand you to mean that whatever was done with these homes in South Trinidad were done under existing law? I'm asking the Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I do not. The Commissioner of Police has indicated that he would speak to this matter and clarify these concerns at the appropriate time. Madam Speaker, as Prime Minister, I cannot go beyond that because I do not have any new or additional information. What I do know, that I'm not in a position to say that anything was done that was illegal. So therefore, I have to conclude that the police has acted under existing law. I also said it was wrong for my colleagues, one of whom has said that it is new law made by this government which has resulted in this situation. Correct. And I'm saying that is not correct. That's all I'm saying.
Honourable members, the time for prime ministerial questions is now spent.
Urgent questions.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Health. Given the recent public disclosure that it is only a matter of time before Trinidad and Tobago experiences a pocket of people infected with measles, could the Minister inform this House if there's any cases that have been recorded in our public health system.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The last indigenous case of measles in Trinidad was recorded in 1991. The last imported case of measles brought into Trinidad was in 1997. Madam Speaker, I raised this issue at a press conference on Friday to alert the population that we need to achieve a vaccination rate of 95%, which is called herd immunity. That is, you vaccinate 95% of your people so that it breaks the transmission to the 5% unprotected or unvaccinated. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has not distinguished itself from 2012 to 2016. Vaccination rates for measles, the first dose from 2012 was 85%, 2016, 86%. For the second dose, 2012, 78%, 2016, 75%. So we were not doing well from 2012 to 2016. It is only in 2018 when I started to push this thing. We achieved a 93% in 2017, close to herd immunity of 95%, and 90% for MMR2 in 2017. Madam Speaker, these figures are estimated figures. The actual percentages are probably better because it does not take into consideration the private sector. This is mainly the public sector. So we may be achieving a 95% vaccination rate, which is herd immunity, but out of an abundance of caution of what is happening globally, where measles was confined to the dustbin of history, it is now making a resurgence of about 20 to 30% globally, especially United States and England, two of our major countries that we have people being exchanged and cruise ships coming in. I am taking absolutely no chances, and I want to get this country as close to maybe 100% if possible. Hence the reason for going public with this issue on Friday out of an abundance of caution and being responsible as a Minister of Health. Thank you very much.
Supplemental member for Faisabad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, thank you for that response. Can you indicate whether any arrangements are in place for seeking out those visitors from Venezuela, for example, and other visitors to this country with regard to offering them the vaccination?
Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, as I indicated in the press conference, I did not want to turn this into a Venezuela issue. It is not a Venezuela issue. It is a measles issue. It is a measles issue. And globally, the countries that are posing the most problems is not Venezuela. It is the United States. It is England. It is Italy. It is continental Europe. Those are the countries that are seeing the explosive rise in the number of cases of measles for lots of factors. And the two counties we are concerned about here are St. Patrick and St. George Central. And we are adopting particular focus activities to get into the hearts and minds of heads of the elders of those two counties to encourage them understand the science in language that they could understand, that we need to get herd immunity up to at least 95% in Trinidad and Tobago.
Supplemental member for Baratarisano.
Minister, there is a strong anti-vaccination movement occurring, as you say, in those countries. And whatever they do happens here. What is the Ministry of Health doing to combat that anti-vaccination movement?
Minister of Health.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question. The modern anti-vaccine movement started in 1998 with Dr. Wakefield, who duped the Lancet, and the Lancet is the Bible of medicine, into printing a flawed report that linked MMR vaccines to autism, based on no science and based on a small sample of 12 children. We have taken note that the anti-vaxxers or the anti-vaccine movement is taking root in Trinidad, and I have been in the forefront battling the anti-vaxxers movement. Madam Speaker, just Saturday gone, the UK's Ministry of Health, Matt Hancock, said this, that anti-vaccination campaigners were morally reprehensible, deeply irresponsible, and had blood on their hands. That is how serious it is. And speaking to the BBC on the same day, he said the UK needed to consider all options to ensure that more children were vaccinated, refusing to rule out the possibility of compulsory vaccination. That is how serious this issue of anti-vaxxers, which leads to vaccine hesitancy, which WHO has now put as one of the 10 most important public health concerns for 2019. Imagine that. We have reached the stage where a disease that was confined to the dustbin of history in 2019 is now one of the 10 most important public health concerns for WHO. And it is largely due to conspiracy theories. Governments are taking action to close down Facebook sites, YouTube sites, Instagram sites that promote this anti-vaxxers propaganda. And we in Trinidad have to take all steps to combat that. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Naparima.
To the Minister of National Security, given the escalation of murders in both Trinidad and Tobago over the past few days, could the Minister inform this House whether he is satisfied that the government's crime-fighting initiatives are working?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to start by saying that this government and this administration takes the issue of crime very seriously, and every crime that is committed against any citizen or anybody resident in Trinidad and Tobago, we take very seriously, and we put as much resources behind it as we can. Furthermore, the recent murders that are being committed within recent times fall into two categories: domestic disputes, family disputes as one category, and then the other category, Madam Speaker, is the use of illegal firearms. With respect to domestic disputes and family disputes, Madam Speaker, it is our respectful view that unfortunately, in the vast majority of occasions, these cannot be prevented by any crime-fighting initiatives. And unfortunately, these have been taking place within recent times. With respect to the use of illegal firearms, what this government intends to do, as we've indicated, is bring very shortly to Parliament legislation specifically aimed at dealing with the scourge of illegal firearms that are being used to commit crimes against the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. This legislation and suite of legislation will deal with bail, in that there will be no bail, we propose, for illegal firearms. We are also looking to increase the fines, sentences, and on some occasions do away with fines for those who are repeat offenders of being in possession of illegal firearms. Madam Speaker, here today, I put the country on notice once again that the 23 votes on this side will support this legislation that is requested by the Police Service of Trinidad and Tobago. The Police Service of Trinidad and Tobago has asked the government's assistance in dealing with illegal firearms. You have the support of this administration. The legislation will require a special majority, so we will see what their crime plan and initiative is to deal with illegal firearms.
Supplemental, Member for Naparima.
Minister, are you willing to accept that your ill-conceived policies towards Venezuela, including your ill-advised asylum policy and inability to protect our borders, are in part responsible for the epidemic of crime, leading to 49 murders last month, 25% more than in April 2018?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, despite the continuation, as we heard the Honorable Prime Minister say a short while ago, of their attempts to continue to misinform the public and to put these false narratives out into public, what is happening with the registration of Venezuelans to take place at the end of this month has absolutely nothing to do with the recent murders committed in Trinidad and Tobago. And it is very hypocritical and disturbing to sit down here and hear in particular the member for Naparima, who was screaming at the top of his voice for months about the crisis in Venezuela and what is being done with respect to Venezuela. And now that our responsible government is registering the Venezuelans, to hear what comes out of the mouth for Naparima.
The member for Oropuch East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The member would get his pressure under control. Madam Speaker, to the Minister of National Security, a quick question as to whether or not the police service has been or will be provided with adequate expenditure for capital investment as part of the Commissioner and indeed the TTPS's aggressive action plan in the coming months to deal with serious crimes, not only recurrent expenditure, wages and so on, but to finance their capital program to deal with the crisis.
Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The simple answer is yes. In fact, the Commissioner of Police is working along with this administration to prioritize the areas of spend in that capital expenditure program in order to provide the police service with the assets they need to fight crime.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 15 oral questions for oral answer. The government will be answering 14 of those 15. We are asking for a deferral of question number 193 for 2 weeks. There are no questions for written answer.
Question 193 has been deferred for 2 weeks. Honorable members, I wish to advise that the Honorable Member for Oropuch West has requested that questions 211 and 212 be withdrawn. The leave which the member seeks is granted. Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 165 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, firstly, it is noteworthy that not all reports of kidnappings and robberies of local fishermen involving Trinidad and Tobago nationals who are engaged in legitimate activity. There is information to support the allegation that some of these incidents of our nationals being kidnapped and or robbed are due to them being caught up in nefarious illegal activities. Secondly, the government and law enforcement, including the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, always take every reported incident of any of our nationals being kidnapped or robbed seriously. If such incidents take place outside of our national waters, we have no jurisdiction and have to rely on assistance from external law enforcement agencies. Madam Speaker, the government is looking at implementing a policy that would require all locally registered marine vessels to be fitted with global positioning system, GPS devices, so that they can be tracked at all times. This would, of course, assist in securing our local marine vessels. The measures undertaken by the various local agencies to prevent occurrences of kidnappings and robberies of local fishermen are as follows. A continuous collaboration between the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, Customs and Excise Division, Immigration Division, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service regarding measures to secure the Southwestern Peninsula and this country's territorial waters generally. B, the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard has undertaken a robust maritime operational strategy which resulted in an increased maritime presence around Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard cannot patrol or take action in Venezuelan waters, since this would be considered a breach of international law and could even be seen as an act of war. Land patrols have also been increased, and the use of intelligence is being utilized in deploying our resources. With regard to Part B of the question, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is in the process of acquiring 2 hostile Cape-class vessels from Hostile Shipbuilding, STY. Additionally, as stated before, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has authorized the refurbishment of 14 Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard interceptors in an effort to bring them back to full serviceability. With regard to Part C of the question, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has indicated for the period January 2017 to January 2019, 27 persons were reported missing, with 17 persons being extracted. That is being removed from the missing persons list by the means of being found or accounted for and being returned to their respective homes. Regarding Part D of the question, the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard has indicated that 2 vessels were retrieved meaning 4 of the reported missing persons made their way back to Trinidad on their own vessels. Thank you very much.
Member for Oropouche West.
Honorable Minister, is there any maritime presence given to the fishermen of Orangefield and Cali Bay who have alleged that Venezuelan nationals have stolen their vessels, including their boat and engine?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't have the specifics of where the assets or maritime assets are currently deployed, nor do I want to give those specifics for obvious reasons, because part of the effectiveness of these maritime operations is that they are not known to persons in advance.
Member for Oropouche West.
Speaker, question number 166 to the Minister of National Security.
National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, according to the information provided by the Commissioner of Police, the Child Protection Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Child Protection Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has engaged in several proactive initiatives to address the circulation of video and images of children engaging in sexual activities. These initiatives include stakeholder partnerships, school visits, media forums. These initiatives are geared towards sensitization and awareness of the laws relating to the type of offense that can be committed and the protection against said offenses that is available to individuals. Additionally, the Child Protection Unit is also involved in informal cyber patrols to monitor content on Facebook and Instagram. Further, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has also informed that 4 males and 1 female have been charged in relation to such offenses over the period January 2017 to January 2019.
Member for Oropouche West.
Question number 171 to the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, the Skinner Park Redevelopment Project is a project under the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs Infrastructure Development Fund Program for fiscal 2018 to 2019. The Skinner Park facility has a long legacy of the hosting of sporting, cultural, and recreational activities in San Fernando. The redevelopment of Skinner Park will ensure that the southern communities and the wider Trinidad and Tobago have a premier multipurpose complex which can be used to host numerous events. The project is being executed in phases, and the scope of phase 1 of the project is as follows. 1. Construction and fit out of a new 3,000-seat, 3-story pavilion, inclusive of a new mayor's box, corporate boxes, and conference center and gym. 2. Dismantling and reassembly of the 3,000-seat uncovered stands to the eastern end of the park. 3. Refurbishment of the cycle track. 4. Refurbishment of the playing field. 5. Installation of LED lighting towers. 6. Supply and installation of a digital scoreboard. 7. General refurbishment and upgrade of the facility and surrounding site. Madam Speaker, expressions of interest for phase 1 of the project were invited by public advertisement in September 2018. Following this, requests for proposals were invited from qualified applicants in January 2019. Proposals are currently being evaluated and no decision has as yet been made with respect to the successful bidder. The estimated cost of the project is $120 million. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche West.
Question number 172 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, according to the information provided by the Commissioner of Police, there have been no official reports made to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service of the Godineau River being used to smuggle contraband items. Nevertheless, the river may be susceptible. Ma'am, when you finish, I'll continue with my answer.
Minister of National Security, please proceed.
Thank you very much. Nevertheless, the river may be susceptible to smuggling activities. Consequently, the river and its environs are patrolled daily by several operational units within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Member for Oropouche West.
Number 173 to the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, there are 3 daily rated workers at the ministry's engineering unit at Ramjatan Trace Penal who were issued with letters on February 19, 2019, stating that their services would be terminated with effect from February 27, 2019. Before the termination took effect on February 25, 2019, the letters were rescinded. The 3 workers suffered no loss of earnings, and the requirement for the payment of a severance benefit did not arise. Thank you kindly, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental, member for Oropouche West.
These workers, their job portfolio made redundant, or could it have been reabsorbed in a new department?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, I don't think I understand the question, given the answer that I gave. I am not understanding the question.
Clarification?
That would help me.
Yes.
Another question.
Yeah, I'm asking, was the job portfolio, or usually we have workers with certain job spec. I'm asking, could those workers who were given termination letters could have been reabsorbed in a new department? That's what I'm asking.
Member for Oropouche West, I believe the answer indicated that that whole situation was retracted. I think that's what I heard. Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Supplemental on the same question to the Minister. Minister, could you state why these letters of termination were rescinded?
Member for Point of Peer. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Yeah, I am not aware. I'm not.
Supplemental. Member for Shogunas West. Member for Shogunas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 174 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the University of the West Indies Open Campus has advised that the Edmund D. Ramesar Center at Subib Trace, Shogunas, is currently 97% complete, with only minor outfitting works to be completed. All works are expected to be completed by the end of May 2019. Thank you very much.
Supplemental.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Honourable Minister, will you be able to say whether there has been any change in the design and subsequent construction of this original Esmond D. Ramesar Open Campus at Shogunas?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, at this point, I will not be able to say whether any change has been effected. Thank you.
Supplemental, member for Shogunas East.
Madam Speaker, Honourable Minister, will you be able to say what programs are going to be conducted at this facility, given that it is expected to be completed in May? And when?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the Open Campus of the University of the West Indies conducts a series of programs in alignment with what are offered at the landed campuses of the University of the West Indies. Thank you.
Member for Shogunas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question 175 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine Campus, has advised that the Faculty of Humanities and Education and the UWI School of Business and Applied Studies Limited, that is Roytech, will commence offering programs and courses at the South Campus at Pinal DB with effect from September 2019. Thank you.
Supplemental, Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This campus originally designed for law faculty. Will there be any intake of law students?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, my answer, I think, was specific. The information that I have from the University of the West Indies is simply that in September 2019, and let me repeat, courses will be Faculty of Humanities and Education and the UE School of Business and Applied Studies, Roytech. Those are the courses that will be provided, and that is the information that I have from the University of the West Indies.
Member for Chaguanas.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Honourable Minister, as the Minister responsible for the University of the West Indies, has there been a change in the original mandate of this campus?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, I am at pains to express the view that I have received information from the University of the West Indies, and I stand by the information that I have received. Thank you.
Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question 176 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, with respect to question A, and that question is the measures taken to ensure these statutory boards and bodies are achieving their mandates. The answer, the Ministry of Education exercises robust oversight of the statutory boards and other agencies under its purview, to ensure good governance, achievement of their respective mandates, adherence to statutory requirements and government's policy, and compliance with the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual issued by the Ministry of Finance. This involves review of board minutes, audited financial statements, internal audit reports and other reports, as well as strategic plans and business plans, raising of queries as they arise, and the maintenance of open communication channels between the ministry and the agencies through meetings, letters, emails, and phone calls. With respect to B, with respect to whether consideration should be given to changing the focus of statutory boards and other bodies to focus on economic diversification, the Ministry of Education recognizes that economic diversification is the bedrock of sustainable development. Accordingly, the Ministry is committed to providing an education system not just for today, but for the labor demands of the future. The training agencies under the Ministry's purview provide support for economic diversification in that, apart from the traditional academic offerings, they offer diverse programs focused on technical vocational education, science, research, innovation, technology, and particularly entrepreneurship. Thank you very much.
Member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 190 to the Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Currently, the Ministry of Health is in discussions with the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs in the provision of evidence-based research to determine the possibility of using medical marijuana as an alternative treatment for all ailments, including epilepsy. To this end, the principal pharmacist, by request from the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, is on an advisory panel to look at the entire issue of medical marijuana. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental, Member for Faizabad.
Thank you, Minister. With regards to reports that the FDA recently approved a drug by the name of Epidiolex to treat seizures, can you indicate what the ministry's position would be going forward.
Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, Epidiolex is the first drug derived from cannabis using CBD, cannabidiol, and does not contain much THC, which gives you the high. Epidiolex is only recommended for two very rare, severe childhood onset forms of epilepsy, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome. It is not a panacea for all types of childhood epilepsy. It has been approved by the FDA since June of 2018, and in discussions with the chairman of the Drug Advisory Committee this morning, who happens to be the chief medical officer, once a drug has been approved by the FDA, we will look at it for approval in Trinidad and Tobago. But I just want to caution parents especially, who may have a child in Trinidad and Tobago with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome or Dravet syndrome, that even in the trials, it is not 100% effective so far, but it does seem to be more effective than the traditional drugs. So the drug does have a place in the arsenal of treating these two very severe, rare forms of childhood onset epilepsy. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 191 to the Minister of Tourism.
Minister of Tourism.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Tourism Trinidad Limited is at this time engaged in the process of formulating its strategic plan for the period 2019 to 2022. The strategic plan is expected to be completed on or before the end of July 2019 and implemented thereafter.
Supplemental member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can you say what is the cost of the strategic plan?
Minister of Tourism.
Madam Speaker, I do not have that information at hand.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 192 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the 14 pre-engineered classrooms in use at the Kaipichama West Secondary School have reached the end of their useful life, and attempting further repairs to them is now not a viable option. In the circumstances, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Education proposes the reconstruction of these classrooms at a cost of approximately $6 million. The new facilities are expected to be ready for occupation at the start of the next school year in September 2019. Thank you very much.
Member for Couva South North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, can you say what is preventing the Ministry of Education from opening the new Kaipichama West Secondary School?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, we were talking about the Kaipichama West Secondary School, and my answer reflected on the need to refurbish or to change the 14 pre-engineered sections. I cannot at this point give any reason for the non-opening of the new school. The information that is available to me is information that I shared this afternoon. Thank you.
Member for Oropuch East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 195 to the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is aware of the adversity facing the people of Venezuela and has continued to monitor closely the developments in that country. Trinidad and Tobago embraces as an integral part of its foreign policy the internationally recognized and accepted principles of non-interference and non-intervention in the affairs of states, respect for sovereignty, adherence to the rule of law, and respect for human rights and democracy. In keeping with our foreign policy position, this government has sought, along with other member states of the Caribbean community, to advocate for peaceful resolution to the situation in the interests of the people of Venezuela. The government of Trinidad and Tobago's foreign policy position is that humanitarian assistance should not be politicized, and in circumstances where assistance is required and requested by countries, the services of long-established multilateral agencies, such as those under the United Nations framework, should be employed in rendering aid. Trinidad and Tobago therefore abstained during the vote on resolution CPRES 1123 on humanitarian assistance in Venezuela on the 27th of March, given its divergence from Trinidad and Tobago's foreign policy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, given our stated position that we are part of a CARICOM initiative to serve as an honest broker to bring contending parties to the table of reason, why in this instance, and when we walked out and when Guaido representatives spoke at the OAS, that all our decisions seem to be on the side of President Maduro?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I would share some information that should assist the honourable member. The central issue of the delivery of humanitarian assistance is one that the resolution treats with and is patently not, or is at variance with our foreign policy position. So that is the main issue that enabled Trinidad and Tobago to register our vote as we did, meaning abstaining. Thank you.
Supplemental member for Naparima.
Minister really understand the concept of non-intervention in the internal affairs. And my question is...
No. 1 minute. 1 minute. The really is what causes the objection. So if that's not part of your question, you could just withdraw that and ask your question.
Given that in climate change, where it calls for the intervention in states to accede to international norms, our support of the Arms Trade Treaty, the International Criminal Court, which involves interference in the domestic affairs of countries, why are we supporting a philosophy that is not consistent with our practice at the UN and international agencies?
I'm not going to allow that question having regard to the responses. Member for Oropuch East.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for your response. Could you just clarify a bit deeper, because I'm not understanding, and I'm almost certain it is my fault, not yours. Are you suggesting that on this particular matter, that the decision of Trinidad and Tobago to abstain from rendering humanitarian assistance was because that assistance to be rendered was outside of the UN framework, and that is why the country took that decision?
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Your laughing could help it.
Member for Oropuch East, please. Minister.
The question posed and the resolution, they do not treat with abstaining from rendering assistance. What the resolution sought to do is to have a pronouncement at the OAS level for humanitarian, or rather the politicization of rendering humanitarian assistance. And we are totally against it, and that is in keeping with our principled position over many, many years in treating with states.
Supplemental member for Oropuch East.
Thank you again so much. So, Mr. Minister, the issue here on the position Trinidad and Tobago took to abstain was that the government felt, consistent with your foreign policy principles, that this had to do with the politicization of humanitarian aid and not the delivery. Is that your answer? Thank you.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM.
For once, Honorable, I almost misquoted his position. I almost misquoted your position. That's a benign way of putting it. But you are correct on this point. You are indeed correct for a change. Thank you.
Member for Oropuch East.
Madam Speaker, I was so flattered I forgot the next question. Question, I think, is number 196 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is public knowledge that Petrotrin has a $850 million bond maturing in August of 2019. This financing facility has been taken over by Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited. The current approach by Trinidad Petroleum Holdings for the refinancing of this bond on the international market is influenced by the international credit ratings of Trinidad Petroleum. I can confirm today that both of the major international credit rating agencies released new ratings for Trinidad Petroleum on the 15th of April 2019. Moody's upgraded Trinidad Petroleum 2 levels to Ba3, and S&P kept Trinidad Petroleum's rating at BB. With respect to the financing itself, the exchange offer for Petrotrin bonds was launched on the 15th of April 2019. The original settlement or offer date was April 26th, which has now been extended, which was extended to the 10th of May, and now to the 24th of May. I'm advised that Trinidad Petroleum continues to work on completing this refinancing assignment.
Oropuch is.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the update. Minister, would you agree with a newspaper article of Tuesday, April 23, 2019 in the Trinidad Guardian, which stated, and I quote, "State-owned Petrotrin made an operating profit of 1.67 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars in its last year in existence. This was revealed in unaudited figures that the company's successor, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, presented recently to investors in order to attract this refinancing and this assistance." Would you agree with that? Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Absolutely not. That is misinformation. It was the exploration and production side of the integrated oil company that Petrotrin was up to the end of November 2018. It has always been known that the exploration and production side of Petrotrin has, from time to time, made an operating profit. It is the refinery, which is part of the integrated company, that has dragged the company down. And therefore, it is not correct to say, as was indicated in that article, that Petrotrin made an operating profit. It is the E&P side of Petrotrin, not the whole company. The whole company made a loss. And you've heard that already for today.
Supplemental question, Carney is.
Would you be able to state whether, with this bond issue, whether Trinidad Petroleum Company would be standing the guarantee or the state will be standing the guarantee? And if the state is standing the guarantee, where are you going to get that guarantee from?
Minister of Finance.
Former.
What? What?
He asked me whether it is this one or that one. The state is not guaranteeing it.
Member for Carney Central.
Taxes that you referred to recently that Petrotrin paid, did they come from the 1.6 billion profit from the petroleum, from the production side?
I will not allow that as a
What I could
supplemental question. East.
Madam Speaker, question number 197 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With respect to the cost of leasing Boeing MAX 8 aircraft, the terms of the aircraft leases with each lessor contain confidentiality provisions which legally restrict Caribbean Airlines from sharing this information at this time. However, Madam Speaker, as a guide, I'm advised by Caribbean Airlines that the typical lease cost of a Boeing MAX 8 aircraft is in the range of $314,000 US per month to $421,000 US per month, excluding escalation and maintenance reserves.
Supplemental, Member for Oropuch.
Madam Speaker, could the Minister clarify, therefore, that for one aircraft, you are dealing with approximately $8 million per month for one aircraft?
Minister of Finance.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I know mathematics is not their strong point. If you multiply 3 by 7, you get 21. So 314,000 US dollars is not 8, it's 2.
Supplemental, member for Korpuchis.
Madam Speaker, since the minister invites us to do some O-level arithmetic and will not tell us exactly the course he's speaking about, could the minister then therefore tell us the identity of the, not the thing, but the middleman, the company that is operating on behalf of CAL to arrange these leases with the supplier?
I would allow that as a supplemental question.
Request for leave to...
Minister of Finance, I didn't allow the question.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hereby seek leave to move the adjournment of the House today under Standing Order 17 for the purpose of discussing as a definite matter of urgent public importance the constitutional framework and legal basis for police action against citizens of Trinidad and Tobago in their private homes and in their local communities. The matter is definite because it pertains to 2 raids by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service on May the 3rd, 2019 in Gulf View, San Fernando, and on the same evening in the Big Yard of Carnage. The matter is urgent because from all reports, nothing was found and no warrants were shown to homeowners or residents prior to or on entry. Therefore, it would seem reasonable to question the legality of police action in both instances. The matter is of public importance because it appears to be an abuse of power and an infringement of the constitutional rights of citizens in both instances. I so move, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under the standing order.
Statements by ministers.
The Minister in the Ministry of Attorney General and Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have been authorized by the Cabinet to make the following statement. Having approved the policy and the provisions of the Private Security Industry Bill 2019, Cabinet has authorized that this bill be laid before this House. Fundamentally, this bill seeks to establish the Private Security Services Authority, itself designed to regulate the affairs of the industry and be a single point of oversight for the entire private security industry. This industry is estimated to consist of about 268 companies involving about 50,000 security personnel, as recorded by the Ministry of National Security. It is also recognized that there are thousands of security personnel operating in Trinidad and Tobago who are not registered with or known to the Ministry of National Security. There's also a sizable cross-section of security personnel who are precepted and therefore fall to be regulated under the Supplemental Police Act and superintended by the Commissioner of Police. The vast majority are not, and therefore the industry is largely unregulated. Madam Speaker, the pace of development and growth of this sector was shaped by the expansion of the industrial base of our society since the 1960s. And more recently, it is being shaped by the continuing economic growth and burgeoning threat and fear of crime. Madam Speaker, consider that the state security apparatus, at least the uniformed sections of the Ministry of National Security, amount to roughly 17,000 personnel. Consider as well, by contrast, Madam Speaker, that the private security personnel number upwards of 50,000. The disparity is stark and significant. This is an observable international trend, and Trinidad and Tobago is not exempt from this. The government recognizes the clear and obvious need for a more modern and efficient philosophy to undergird a modern and holistic legislative framework, as this industry has grown and continues to grow exponentially, both in the scope and the nature of its activities and the number of firms in operation and personnel. Madam Speaker, our records reveal that the idea of regulating this industry began as far back as 1992, but somehow progressed no further than an idea. It never made its way to implementation. I am more than usually pleased, Madam Speaker, on the advice of the Cabinet, under the determined direction of the member for Dago Martin West, our leader, to present this bill here today for our consideration. It is quite clear that effective management and regulation is necessary. The current unmanaged and unregulated state of the private industry, security industry, has in a perverse way even contributed to the growing crime rate in Trinidad and Tobago, given that there are serious issues of poor or non-existent vetting, issues of untrained and ill-equipped, often unsupervised persons, some of whom may have criminal backgrounds and are paid purportedly to protect our citizens and their property. Some use their access in these offices to perpetrate and instigate serious crimes. Yet, there is no effective legislation in place, which legislation should, among other things, set standards for and supervise the industry. There is not, Madam Speaker, an authoritative body to oversee and supervise operators. There is no body to ensure wholesome employment practices, to regulate performance and standards, to oversee training and certification of employees, to ensure that the proper and safe equipment is issued and used, to effect the licensing of operators and officers, and certainly there is no proper arrangement to deal with the treatment of complaint from end users of the service, that is to say, the general public. This proposed legislation aims to create a regulatory body with the power to license the operators of security firms, inclusive of the individuals they employ, and to provide for secondary legislation to regulate its affairs as developing conditions necessitate. It is intended that this new independent body would be accountable to the Minister of National Security and, of course, to the Parliament. This body would essentially adopt the functions of the Commissioner of Police under Section 5 of the Supplemental Police Act, Chapter 1502, namely that of command and superintendence of the entire private security industry. Amendments to the Supplemental Police Act will be necessary so as to reconcile the change or shift in powers. In addition, the authority, albeit initially funded by the state, would eventually be self-sufficient in nature, as its operational costs would be funded by licensing fees paid by companies and officers operating within the private security industry and other such income. The concept of establishing a regulatory body to manage the private security industry is by no means novel. Indeed, it has been observed as the preferred method of several nations, including the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Canada, several European nations, and of course, neighboring Jamaica. Madam Speaker, we studied the Jamaican and the UK experiences very closely and benefited greatly from these. This proposed legislation provides for the following: establishment of a licensing regime, provide for certification of individuals within the industry in accordance with tiered structure. This structure would recognize varying specialist skills in the security field. This situation, as now it currently exists, allows for anyone from a CARICOM country to set up a security firm under the free movement of services provisions guaranteed by that agreement. In the present state of industry self-regulation, such a situation opens individuals and this country to various disadvantages. With professional certification, it would become easier to track the movement and guarantee the status and compatibility of standards of security personnel within the region. It would provide as well for the establishment of certification agencies, establishment of a standard for training. It would confer powers similar to those on the Commissioner of Police. It will regulate minimum pay levels according to the tiered professional structured base. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, it will create an appeals tribunal and regulations will be prepared to give effect to it. As I close, Madam Speaker, I would like to underscore that one primary duty of every state is to secure and make its citizens safe within the jurisdiction. Feelings of insecurity have led to more and more people turning to the private security industry to protect themselves, their property, and their families. The philosophy behind these measures involves bringing this large group of security workers to a level of professionalism and efficiency such that our vulnerability to criminals and violent extremists by their numbers and presence would be minimized wherever they operate. It means simply more eyes, more legs, more hands, and more resources will be brought to bear. The question in conclusion is, who will guard the guards? These measures will not necessarily guard them per se, but will make them better organized, more efficient, and stronger. It is for this reason, Madam Speaker, that the private security bill is greatly needed as we continue to bolster the foundations of safety and security in this nation. The private security industry has a critical role to play. Madam Speaker, we thank you.
Personal explanations. Introduction of bills. Supplemental Police Amendment Bill 2019 in the name of the Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. The Private Security Industry Bill 2019 in the name of the Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a Minister.
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, having regard to the interim report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018, I beg to move that the committee be allowed an extension in order to complete its work and submit a final report by May 13th, 2019. Thank you very kindly.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018 be allowed an extension in order to complete its work and submit a final report by May 13, 2019. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Wednesday, May 1st, 2019, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Combat Corruption and Other Wrongdoings by Encouraging and Facilitating Disclosure of Improper Conduct in the Public and Private Sector to protect persons making those disclosures from detrimental action, to regulate the receiving, investigating, or otherwise dealing with disclosures of improper conduct, and to provide for other matters connected therewith. Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when the Attorney General presented these measures last week, he indicated that these measures were laid before this House a very, very long time ago, very shortly after we came to office, and they were sent to a Joint Select Committee. In order that the public understand the implications of this, permit me to say, well, the Attorney General as well said, when it went before the Joint Select Committee, we received a number of submissions. The we he was referring to, obviously, would include members of the opposition, members of the independent benches, and of course, members of the government. The committee consisted of course, the Attorney General, Senator Foster Cummins, Senator Wade Mark, Senator Sophia Choate, Minister Young, MP Stuart Young, MP Edmund Dillon, and of course, MP Prakash Ramadar. Madam Speaker, I went through that because I want the public to recognize and to take note of the fact that the opposition was very much involved in the deliberations of these measures for the past few years in Joint Select Committee before they emerge for our discussions before us here today. Witnesses, as we know, Madam Speaker, is the lifeblood of a justice system. Whether civil or criminal, witnesses are critical for the operation of and for successful prosecutions of matters, whether, as I said, civil or criminal. The element of this is voluntariness. For the most part, a prosecutor will tell you a voluntary and a willing witness is far more effective than an unwilling and involuntary witness. In the United States, it is well known, and it ought to be this way everywhere, issues around witnesses are taken particularly seriously. The slightest interference with a witness brings the whole range of criminal sanction down on the offender. In criminal cases in Trinidad here, we have seen in a very famous case, now totally complete, Dolce and his gang dealt with. And in that matter, just to underscore the point, there was a key state witness. The point I want to highlight around this, because it was attended to earlier, is that that person was instrumental in causing a successful prosecution. Sometimes their evidence is critical in securing a conviction. And most of all, from the information available to me, that witness was given full protection of this country, this state. Left the country as part of an agreement, new opportunities, identities, and what have you, and therefore that matter was successfully resolved in the public interest. In civil cases, as we know, the concept of indemnification looms large. It is therefore in accordance with clauses 21 and 24 of these measures before us, which some previous speakers have alluded to, pointing out a whistleblower is a very serious offense. Clause 21 of the measures before us treats with that. And, Madam Speaker, in today's world, pointing out a whistleblower has led and could lead to death, a very serious situation. And therefore, law enforcement is very critical in support of these measures. The average citizen would ask, because the whistleblower legislation that is before us, a bill, an act to combat corruption and other wrongdoings by encouraging and facilitating disclosures of improper conduct in the public and private sector to protect persons making disclosures from detrimental action. Madam Speaker, the average citizen would ask, because these measures really provide a legal framework for protection, which I'll come to a little more closely. The average citizen would ask, well, how does that help me? Akin to, for example, a domestic violence order. We have had examples of persons who had the benefit of these orders and still were the subject of violent attack. These measures here are to protect the whistleblower from detrimental action. And detrimental action is defined in great detail in the law. It includes, but not limited to, unfairly subject to disciplinary action by the employer or the firm, unfair dismissal, suspension, or demotion, harassment, intimidation, victimization, transfer against his will, transfers are used sometimes, and a number of other ways in which detrimental action, threatened with any of these actions, otherwise suffering injury, loss, damage in relation to employment, family, life, career, profession, trade, or business. A lot of people are very coy. A lot of people are worried to share information that the public will do well to have because they fear these kinds of actions taken against them. And therefore, this legislation is designed to protect persons from such detrimental action, as it is called. That does not obviate and still leaves place for the normal security arrangements around all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And in particular, when it comes to witnesses, especially in criminal matters, We have the Justice Protection Program, which is designed to protect persons who become witnesses. And I told you a while ago, by way of an example, in the Dolcedi matter, the extent to which the state went to protect a witness and to ensure that he gave evidence and did so safely. So that, Madam Speaker, was important. This bill is non-political, because I say so because one of my friends on the other side mentioned something about politics. This is a non-political piece of legislation, and it is designed to protect all persons who voluntarily decide to be whistleblowers. There's a well-thought-out structure in here, and the structure essentially, Madam Speaker, if I may remind this House, is bifurcated. You have the external structure where a number, 21 actually, of established operational institutions in this country are highlighted as whistleblowing units where citizens can go to give information without fear of detrimental action. And then you have the internal arrangement where firms, however large or however small, can establish a whistleblower protection officer who must be designated for that purpose. Very cost effective, doesn't cost anything, doesn't require any special training. All that is required is a sense of administrative capacity to deal with documents and to secure them, integrity, confidentiality. And of course, firms will engage in providing some kind of training as this legislation develops so that such persons can know what is involved. As I say, it is bifurcated. So anyone who wants to give information about some improper conduct that is taking place within his or her knowledge can go either to his own internal process, where there's a whistleblowing officer so designated in the firm, very small firm, medium size or large, private as well or public, and other than that, they could go to any of these units. Madam Speaker, let me just give a few examples of some of these whistleblowing units among the 21 as listed in the schedule to this law. The Auditor General, the Board of Inland Revenue, the Central Bank, the Equal Opportunities Commission, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and of course, the good old Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, where many of these things go. And these are designated authorities under the law. And you ask, Madam Speaker, you may ask, one may ask, and I have looked on these designated authorities and asked myself, what do they share in common? One, they are independent as a characteristic. Two, Madam Speaker, they have experience in dealing with confidential information and complaints over time by nature of their operations. So, Madam Speaker, they are there. And if someone does not want to take his, for any reason, real or imagined, doesn't want to take his complaint to the internal structure within his firm that is now available under this law, he or she can go to one of these whistleblowing units, one of the 21. And the law provides that when the internal officer determines that there is sufficient reason to pass this further, and by so let me, for the purposes of the layman, say, when it doesn't pass the dustbin test. There was an occasion in this Parliament when a member of Parliament received a number of emails, and most of us as members of Parliament receive information about situations that might appear or are being put to us as being improper or criminal or corrupt. And we have to make the first judgment. There are some vexatious people, there are some vexatious complaints. When you hear them, they don't pass what I call the dustbin test. So it falls. But there are some, Madam Speaker, that you take more seriously than that. And the records of this parliament show that a certain number of emails came and a member of parliament took it more seriously than the dustbin test and passed it to an authority in this country asking that it be investigated. The records would also show that was not done for 6 months, and the member came to this house, the forum available to him, and raised the matter here and did nothing more than raise them and call for an investigation, which, according to the records, are ongoing. So when the whistleblowing officer on the internal approach gets this information, if it passes the dustbin test, then he now passes this, he or she, to one of the 21 units established, as I've identified, for their further attention. So, Madam Speaker, all of the citizens of this country who see wrongdoing and are willing, this is designed to encourage them, as the long title says, to come forward in the public interest voluntarily and share this information for all our interests, because there's a lot that happens that the authorities would never otherwise know about. So it has to be encouraged. And part of that encouragement is to ensure that they enjoy full protection under law and given assurances that their physical protection, like the example I gave earlier, can be dealt with, has been dealt with, and is being dealt with under current law and arrangements in Trinidad and Tobago. And then, of course, let me move swiftly to the issue of retrospectivity, not retroactive criminal law, as one of our colleagues here misunderstood it. This is about retrospectivity. Clause 7 says that any whistleblower complaint or element of whistleblowing after the passage of this act will be protected or can be treated by this law. In other words, whatever happened before we passed this law has already happened. But a complaint made or a disclosure made after the passage of this law can, of course, operate in respect of past actions, because they're still very much in the public interest. And therefore, in that sense, there's no time bar. Just like in the civil asset forfeiture, as I call it, common law, there's no time bar save and except for tax offenses, where we stipulated that it could only go as far as 6 years because the income tax law mandated that persons or permitted persons to destroy tax documents that are more than 6 years old. Madam Speaker, Clause 8 deals with a very important aspect of this law, that is to say, persons who may be malicious in their dealings. There is what is known as protected disclosure. And Clause 8 says a disclosure is protected if A, it is made in accordance with Section 7, it is made in good faith, and at the time of making the disclosure, the whistleblower reasonably believes, based on the information he has at that time, that the information disclosed is substantially true, I'm paraphrasing, and that the information disclosed tends to show that his employer, another employee of his employer, or person acting in his employer's behalf is engaging or prepared to engage in improper conduct. And so the section goes. Madam Speaker, this section is designed to protect both the whistleblower and other persons in the national community. Because by demanding, as this does, that it be made and to enjoy the protections, as I've explained, only when, among other things, the whistleblower is acting in good faith, not only protects him, but it protects all other persons from bad will and ill faith, so to speak. So this Clause 8 is very, very, very important. And of course, we have had examples of bad faith disclosures in this country. By way of an example, and very briefly, a member of parliament still sitting in this house got up in this house and read into the Hansard certain disclosures. It transpired, Madam Speaker, that it was made with bad will, ill faith, I would call it, maliciously. And I say so on the basis of the fact that that so-called whistleblower told the country it was concocted by a member of parliament at that time and a member of the media. But more importantly, by way of evidence, that it was concocted maliciously is the fact that the director of public prosecutions, when the day for court came on the basis of that malicious disclosure, walked into the court in personam and told the court that all these matters are henceforth annulled, to be withdrawn. That is the evidence. And therefore, these measures protect such persons from being victims of malicious whistleblowers. And while a disclosure made by a member of parliament typically would be protected by parliamentary privilege, Clause 9 of this bill says, and let me just read it, a disclosure of information in respect to which a claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in is not protected disclosure if it is made by a person to whom the information has been disclosed. So it treats with this law, treats with disclosures from a parliamentarian and disclosures that are enjoying legal privilege. A very well thought out, wide-ranging piece of legislation before us for our consideration. Madam Speaker, I just want to run to Clause 18 of this bill. I'm choosing the elements that the public ought to understand because there was a lot of misinformation flying around the place about these measures, Madam Speaker, scaring the public. This law is designed to encourage the public in the public interest to share information. Clause 18 of this bill, under the rubric protection of whistleblowers, says, and I quote, subject to the exceptions provided for in this act, despite any prohibition of or restriction on the disclosure of information under any written law, rule of law, contract, oath, or practice, a whistleblower shall not be subjected to detrimental action on account of his having made a protected disclosure. All of that fine legal language says that notwithstanding any oath of secrecy and privacy or any contract provision, because many contracts actually say that the one party is never to reveal under no circumstances information that would have come to his or her attention in the course of operating that contract. And of course, some people take oaths and all of that. And Madam Speaker, this is very critical because it clearly states in this Clause 18 that the whistleblower will be given full protection under this law. And it also says, Madam Speaker, in Clause 19, that notwithstanding any other law, but subject to Section 21, a whistleblower who makes a protected disclosure is not liable to any criminal, civil, or disciplinary proceedings for having so done. Further protection. Further protection. So he will not be liable to any criminal, civil, or disciplinary proceedings. He is protected from such detrimental action. But whistleblower in Clause 2, whistleblower protection shall not be prejudiced on the basis that the whistleblower was in good faith mistaken about the importance of it, or any perceived threat to the public interest on which the disclosure was based or materialized. And Madam Speaker, C says the whistleblower has not fully respected the procedural requirements of this act. Those things should not prejudice his protected disclosure. Further protection for the whistleblower by way of encouraging him or her in this civilized society to share information that is detrimental to us all. And of course, no immunity to a whistleblower if he was perpetrator or an accomplice. So if the whistleblower was a perpetrator of one of the acts complained of, improper conduct, or if he was an accomplice to it, this law does not give him a get out of jail free walk away card. He will still be able, in those circumstances, and will still be subject to civil and criminal liability. He will still be, except, of course, in Clause 20, arrangements are made for leniency, and that is the allurement, that is the benefit that someone will have as a whistleblower, even if he or she was engaged in the actions complained of and detected. And this is what the Attorney General meant when he quoted the typical American saying by law enforcers there, that the first man on the bus gets the best seat. If you come out of it, like happened in the Dolce criminal matter, or if any whistleblower in any matter in Trinidad and Tobago comes out of the criminal behavior and speaks to the state, either through the internal process or through the TTPS in the external process as one of the 21 units, such a person will not be immune from criminal action, but will be given an assurance of leniency, as this law expressly states in subsection 3, which in part says, in any criminal proceedings instituted against a whistleblower, based on the fact that the whistleblower was a perpetrator of or an accomplice in the improper conduct disclosed by the whistleblower, the court shall, in giving its judgment or decision, take into due account the fact that the disclosure was made by the whistleblower, and B, whether the whistleblower has assisted the police to apprehend any other persons involved in the commission of offense, and the punishment of the whistleblower may be mitigated or remitted as the court thinks fit, and the court shall expressly refer to this subsection in its judgment or decision. Essentially, this is not new, Madam Speaker, but we are here codifying it. And I want the members of the public to understand and to internalize it, because there was a lot of misinformation from the other side and by people who ought to know better, to discourage people when we are here today presenting measures to encourage them by protecting them and even giving them an assurance of leniency in cases where they would have participated in criminal conduct. So, when someone is whispering this, I don't think that's sub judice. I don't want member for Caranese. I don't want to say anything about that. You're distracting me. I don't want to talk about any senior counsel Nelson.
Ignore him.
Right. Madam, a lot could be said, but I don't want to say anything on that. Madam Speaker, Clause 21 of these measures, Clause 21, prohibits the disclosure of information in respect of the identity of the whistleblower. Another very critical tier of protection, as I indicated earlier, Madam Speaker, in today's world, we have seen where whistleblowers, people who give information, informants, informers as they are called, by those who want to perpetrate crime and who will prefer their actions to remain in the dark. It can end in people's deaths. And therefore, in Clause 21 here, it makes it very clear that disclosing the identity of whistleblowers where that is not sanctioned is a serious matter and is prohibited under this law. Madam Speaker, this law exists in several other countries of the world and in different shapes and forms. Ours, as I say, is bifurcated. We have elements of a centralized system, that is to say, through the units, the 21 of them that we have established. I consider them to be centralized, where citizens all over could go to these independent bodies, designated authorities, and give information. They being independent, they being experienced in dealing with confidential and serious issues, some of the examples I gave you. And as well, we have the internal procedure, which to my mind reflects not the centralized, but the more diverse way it's done. In some countries, they have one or the other. In some countries, they have whistleblower legislation dealing only with public agencies and institutions, and in other jurisdictions, only with private. We have both. So we have really looked around the globe and taken the best that is on offer, put it together in this package as we codify this business of whistleblower disclosures for the benefit of us all. Madam Speaker, when the member for Urupuch East spoke, he raised the issues of witness protection. I think I have dealt with that adequately, and I've given a live example. Persons are able to be kept outside of the jurisdiction when being kept in the jurisdiction is too troublesome, based on the assessments of the experts who handle them. But the member for Urupuch East, he suggested that we create in these measures an offense of inducement, where it can be highlighted that someone induced a whistleblower to give malicious information. That, I submit, for the benefit of the member for Urupuch East, is not necessary, because we already have the offense of perverting the course of public justice, and such conduct could quite easily be dealt with under the terms of the offense of perverting the course of public judgment, inducement of someone to do that. So in the example I gave earlier, where a man gave malicious information concocted by a media person and a member of parliament at the time, and that was brought to this house by another very willing member of parliament. That, Madam Speaker, what is your problem?
Standing order, 55. Tedious repetition, Madam.
Honorable members, any member is entitled to stand up and raise a matter under the standing orders. Member for Laventille West, please proceed.
Thank you very much for your protection, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I was indicating, and will continue undisturbed, in such circumstances, perverting the course of public justice would have been quite appropriate. And now that it has come to my head, I must now inquire, as a citizen with access, what has become of that? Because it is clear from what I have submitted here, beyond challenge, that that matter had to be withdrawn by the DPP. I must now seek, as a citizen with access and as a member of parliament, to find out whatever became of that. Because we have had cases like that, and it has just gone a begging. So I give the member for Urupuch East that that perverting the course of justice could in fact do it. I've also already...
Member for Laventille West, your original 30 minutes are now spent. You're entitled 15 more minutes to wind up your presentation.
Thank you very warmly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member for Urupuch East as well raised what he considered to be a very bright idea of having the parliament be one of those designated authorities. Well, the parliament does, in fairness to the member, have a facility through joint select committees to investigate complaints. We do. But of course, Madam Speaker, the parliament itself doesn't have investigative capacity. it is when we convene a joint select committee and specific issues are raised within the mandate of that committee, such investigation. That's very different from the 21 organizations that we have listed as designated authorities. But more than that, the Office of the Ombudsman is one of those 21 designated authorities. And Madam Speaker, the Office of the Ombudsman is, the Ombudsman is an officer of the Parliament. The Office of the Ombudsman is an officer of the Parliament. So the suggestion from my friend for Oropuchis is not necessary, and it falls flatly to the ground. Not necessary. Right? So, Madam Speaker, this piece of legislation is all an attack on white-collar crime in particular, corruption. And, Madam Speaker, I would like to share with this House very quickly, to remind members of this House, that over the last 4 years in the governance of this country, this government can boast of saving this country billions of dollars. I am able to stand here on my oath and say truthfully that for the first year, Madam Speaker, in the cabinet, we had to deal incessantly with notes that we considered to be overburdened, over-invoiced, costing taxpayers far more than we as reasonable, sober people in the protection of the public purse thought. And we would send them back. Because by the time we were in government, we came in, the machinery of the state, all the state enterprises, they had been nurtured along a particular way. Excessive budgets by the billions were coming through.
Madam
and we
Speaker,
would send them
48-1.
back. What is your problem?
Again, member for Laventille West, any members entitled to raise standing order. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we dealt with every single one in the public interest. We sent them back and back and back. And I can tell you, in the end, when we saw the real figures after we peeled off all the fat that was coming through as a matter of course and habit, because the machinery was still grinding, you know, all the excessive spending. Today, any of my colleagues can raise their hands and say, we don't see that no more. When they come good to the cabinet, and we boast of saving this country billions of dollars. Let me give you some facts in support of my lofty submission. In respect of the Komuto Highway, the cost in 2015 on the record for the cabinet and for this country was 400.
Madam Speaker, 48-1.
Okay, so member for Laventille West, while I allowed you to make the bold, broad statement, I would like you to make very quickly the connection of these details to the bill that is before us, please.
Madam Speaker, I'm saying that we did not have whistleblower legislation at that time. But there must be people who would know why this Komuto Highway project was to cost $550 million. Today, it is run at a cost of $400 million, a saving, Madam Speaker, of a substantial amount of public money, $150 million. And the Curep flyover, $412 million in 2015, costing us $221 million, same project. And finally, the Red House Rehabilitation Project, $886 million in 2015 when we came. It is costing this country almost, well, half, $441 million. In those three projects, along with the Point Fortin Hospital, from $1.5 billion to $1.1 billion, those alone give us a saving of $1.26 billion. This whistleblower legislation, Madam Speaker, is to support people who know about those ballooned and inflated figures and where the money go. For example, Madam Speaker, I don't want to get into too much. But if, by way of my final example, a budget moved from, say, $40 million in a particular period, consistently for years, and then jumped to 130 million, some persons might find that suspicious and troubling. And there are people, or maybe people, who would know why this legislation is designed to encourage them. And those of us who are sitting in this house and who would have sat in government, we have a responsibility to protect the public purse and to protect the public interest. That's what we are doing as we present these measures here today, Madam Speaker. And we had promised this legislation a long time back, since we were in opposition. And as soon as we walked into the door, the corridors of office, we put it before the House. Madam Speaker, I think that Trinidad and Tobago is in a place where it needs this. This is the way to manage whistleblowers. The record of this country shows that there was a very prominent public service whistleblower who wrote a letter whistleblowing to the then leader of the government. Twice. And rather than bring whistleblower legislation as we do today, and rather than take preemptive action, the records of this country in the public domain show that those letters were sent to the person against whom allegations were being made. The upshot was that officer, afraid of detrimental action, as we highlight here in clause 3, in clause 4, afraid of detrimental action, and as I said, in today's world could lead to death. That whistleblower packed up and gave up her high office and ran away. That's how other people handle whistleblower. That's not the case here. We have come to Parliament with this legislation, as I close, with clear measures to encourage and to protect whistleblowers, Madam Speaker, giving them guarantees under law. And Madam Speaker, with that in mind, and recognizing that these measures require the support of both sides of this House, and I've heard friends on the other side talk about past corruption and PNM corruption, this is an opportunity to protect those who know about it. So on that logic alone, Member for Siparia, I call on you to do the right and honorable thing today. Lead your troops right. Our leaders stood up here in this debate last week and made it clear that every single vote on this House will be put behind this in the public interest. And as I close, I call on the member for Siparia, the leader of the opposition, to lead your troops right. This is for the good of the public. This is to protect whistleblowers. This is to protect the public from malicious whistleblowers. You have every reason to support it. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I wish to take this opportunity to contribute on this whistleblower legislation. And prior to the Honourable Member for Laventille West speaking, 10 members spoke on this bill, 5 on that side, 5 on our side. And I want to congratulate members led by our opening batsman, the member for Oropuch East, for their contribution and the learning they added. Learning. Unfortunately, my good friend, the member for Laventille West, added nothing new. Nothing new. And I want to really talk about the virtual cry de coeur by the Honorable Attorney General when he presented the bill, seeking the opposition support for this bill. This bill, to paraphrase him, Madam Speaker, sits atop in a hierarchy of legislation, and in his attempt to bring about legislation and create legal Darwinism,
He regarded this bill as absolutely necessary, Madam Speaker. But I find it passing strange in demonstrating the absolute necessity of the bill that he truncated the Joint Select Committee that looked after this piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, I think it was the member for St. Joseph who spoke of death by 1,000 cuts by a particular opposition member of parliament. But the Honorable Attorney General, in his presentation, spoke highly of the member for St. Augustine making contribution at the Joint Select Committee, and that therefore he regarded the contribution of the opposition as being beneficial to the legislation. But, Madam Speaker, the Joint Select Committee is a mechanism in which the Parliament deals with complex issues. And this piece of legislation deals with the creation of an ethical standard, and it places in the context of the legislation moral issues. I think my colleague, the member for Caroni Central and the member for Tabaquite, spoke about those issues. So in the current context, why did you truncate it? It requires a 3/4 majority. It requires the vote of the opposition, but you do not embrace the opposition at the Joint Select Committee level. So is it that you are inherent in coming to this Parliament without going through that process, eliminating the independent Senate? You eliminated the independent Senate. This is the construct, this is the social contract, this is the Parliament of this country, in which there are three elements: the opposition, the government, and the independents. But you put it on one UNC senator. All the blame is cast. And I will quote, Madam Speaker, what the Honorable Attorney General said. He said that he took the decision to truncate and not go. He took that decision to come before the House. So, Madam Speaker, I said to myself, why? The question is why? So you're here before us, you want to create, you want to have, why didn't the Attorney General, let me put it differently, Madam Speaker, why didn't the Attorney General have the level of mutual tolerance for the Select Committee of the Parliament? There is need for patience, there's need for patience, there is need for self-restraint, there is need for tolerance. It is one of our watchword: discipline, tolerance, and production. So why the rush? Why the rush? You know, and when I listen to him, come ye, all who know. You know, he reminded me, Madam Speaker, of a song by Flo Rida. Blow my whistle, baby, let me know. But that is a different context, Madam Speaker. A different context altogether. Madam Speaker, so the question is, why did the Attorney General speak in that fashion? Why? And it is only when I read the Hansard comments of the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Attorney General, then I began to appreciate that there is indeed a trigger why that this legislation, what catalyzed this legislation before us, what stimulated this legislation before us. And I go into the Hansard, Madam Speaker, on the last occasion, and I at page 14. Madam Speaker, quite interestingly, this is the Attorney General sticking a pin at the caucus of the government. In dealing with this law, we sat down as a group, and there were 3 letters provided to the government. One addressed to the Minister of National Security, one addressed to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development, and one to the Attorney General. And in that, without going into the specifics, a whistleblower stepped forward anonymously and gave information in relation to fraud touching and concerning 147 million of fraudulent activity. Just like that, by pure coincidence, long before we announced that this bill was going to be debated. But, Madam Speaker, when the Honorable Attorney General said that, I said, okay, that is not a problem. But when the Honorable Prime Minister spoke, this is what he said at page 16 of his contribution on the last occasion. You heard today about $100 million reference to something wrong. I will tell you, Madam Speaker, I am going to ask this House, as I have asked the Attorney General a few months ago, to make sure that this bill comes to the House and it will go to the floor. So it is by prime ministerial diktat that the Joint Select Committee, in which, and I will point out that if the opportunity was taken to go before the Joint Select Committee, a lot of what is contained in the bill that is not a total protection would have been corrected. And I will show later on, Madam Speaker. First, I will deal so that this is the context. It almost appears from this as ad hominem legislation. But we understand the context of ad hominem and that it is generally applicable. But it appears that way, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would also want to deal with the question of retrospectivity. My colleague, the Honorable Minister, parliamentary colleague that is from Laventille West, spoke about it. But there is a legal opinion given by the CPC on the issue. So I will want to deal with that. I will also want to deal with the cultural underpinnings of the society that shows the contextual framework and how dangerous it is to have whistleblower protection and whistleblower legislation without acknowledging the nature and content in our society, Madam Speaker. And then, Madam Speaker, I will then raise the issue of regulations. Look, we have been some time here in the House. The Honorable Attorney General, when he sat on this side, ensured that unless there was regulations available to have sight of, that you would not participate in anything that was inconsistent with the Constitution, as this bill is. So the bill abrogates breaches, Section 4 and Section 5 of the Constitution. But the legislation in Section 28 and 29 gives the minister the power to deal with regulations, but we have no sight. So effectively, what we are doing here today is buying cat and bag, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I want to deal now, as I have outlined what I plan to deal with. I just want to indicate to the Honourable Member for Laventille West, this is not centralized legislation. This is not centralized legislation. This is decentralized legislation. You have 21 designating authorities. You have 21 units arising in those designating authorities. You do not have them under one roof. That is the idea of centralization. So get your adjectives right with respect to understanding of the nature and content of this legislation, Madam Speaker. So you have a situation where, as the Attorney General in his contribution indicated, that this is retrospective legislation, and that the clause that deals with the retrospectivity, clause 5, states as follows, Madam Speaker, and I quote from the legislation: "This act applies to any disclosure made after the coming into force of this act, irrespective of whether or not the conduct or the improper conduct to which the disclosure relates occurred before or after the coming into force of this act." The Honourable Member for Laventille West in his contribution indicated that this is going all the way back, that therefore you have a situation where whatever was done before, and the whistleblower comes forward today on the passage of this act, that action can be taken subsequently. Madam Speaker, I want to read into the record what the CPC had to say on this matter. Talking about provision 5 here, the provision is therefore retrospective in that it permits a disclosure to be made in respect of improper conduct which occurred before the coming into force of the proposed act. The issue raised by this provision is whether it is objectionably retrospective and therefore infringes the right of the individual to the protection of the law enshrined in Section 4B of the Constitution. According to Francis Bennion, quote, the essential nature of a legal system is that current law should govern current activities. If we do something today, we feel that the law applying to it should be the law enforced today, not tomorrow's backward adjustment of it. Such, we believe, is the nature of the law. The basic principle against retrospectivity is no more than a simple fairness, which ought to be the basis of every principle, which ought to be the basis of every rule. End of quote. It therefore follows that if the retrospectivity of an enactment is contrary to the essential nature of law, then the enactment may be said to infringe the right of the individual to the protection of the law. And the opinion goes on to say, Madam Speaker, all retrospective enactments are not objectionable. According to Bennion, it is important to grasp the true nature of the objectionable retrospectivity, which is the past legal effect of an act or omission is retroactively altered by a later change in the law. However, the mere fact that a change is operative with regard to past events does not mean that it is objectionably retrospective. Changes relating to the past are only objectionable if they alter the legal nature of an act or omission in itself. A change in law is not objectionable merely because it takes note that a past event has happened and bases new legal consequences upon it. This clause does not purport to change the nature of the conduct which occurred before the coming into the force of the proposed act. It does seek to turn conduct which is lawful or proper before the commencement of the act into unlawful or improper upon the commencement of the act. It merely refers to improper conduct which may have occurred before the commencement of the act and permits a whistleblower to disclose information in relation to such improper conduct. The legal consequences for such a conduct would continue to be the same consequences that applied at the time of the conduct. So I don't know where the honorable member indicated that it is otherwise. What he's saying is the conduct, there's no law that indicated that the conduct was improper then, so you cannot have law today indicating that the conduct was objectionable to the law then, because there was no breach of law. So I think the honorable member is misinterpreting what is being said. But there is a pattern, a patent approach by the Attorney General to do retrospective legislation. Why is that so? Why is that so? Madam Speaker, I have looked at all the relevant legislation that they modeled this upon. The honorable member for Laventille West spoke. The New Zealand model, the Malaysian model, the Maltese model, the Jamaican model. And in none of those model legislation and the British model, they included retrospectivity. What is the agenda of this government, Madam Speaker? What is the agenda? Because, yeah, and that therefore, inherent in that retrospectivity is the ad hominem argument. Because if the law is not applicable then, and you cannot go and say that you get information today that the conduct then was improper because only today you have improper conduct. Well, then it is politics you're playing. It is politics you're playing. And that therefore is mauvais and gossip you want to engage in. Madam Speaker. So when you have this approach, therefore, that we recognize that it is the tone of at the top, so they will continue the process with information to demonize people, to demonize people, and I want to say in particular the members of the opposition, Madam Speaker, because you see, the guardrails of our democracy require us to stand here, do our duty. Our duty does not mean to respond to your cries in that sense. There ought to be compromise in bringing about legislation. But if the tone at the top of of the government is to demonize people, then we cannot participate in that. We cannot participate in that, Madam Speaker. And because if you do not have this level of institutional forbearance and the patience to go before a joint select committee, if you do not have this level of tolerance, and there is this level of distrust, Madam Speaker, there is a big problem in that the radius of trust around this government is very low. Correct. Very, very low. And that therefore, that is why you have problems with the social capital in this country. You look what is happening, crime, the level of criminality. You look at the newspaper headline today, the bloodiest month in our history. What that point to? It points to what my colleague Tarani Central spoke about, dissonance, disconnectedness, a lack of social capital. And when you recognize this reality, then you can now deal with what are the cultural factors that underpin this legislation. What is the contextual environment which we find ourselves in? Madam Speaker, Preet Bharara, New York District, United States Attorney for the New York area, over 200 assistant district attorneys under his watch from 2009 to 2017. He was fired by Mr. Trump when he took power. This is what he says in his book, Doing Justice, a very recent edition, Madam Speaker. Snitches, the moral quicksand of cooperating witnesses. Tattling is not attractive. It is a betrayal. No one likes a snitch. People who snitch on those close to them make us uncomfortable, makes us recoil a bit. There's baked into our DNA an aversion, a moral distaste, even for this kind of informant, even though such turncoats are the bread and butter of countless criminal investigations. This investigative tool, the criminal turned government witness, captures the public imagination unlike any other. The snitch, the rat, the Judas, also known as the cooperator. Prosecutors like to think that the integrity of the prosecutor is not ever on trial. In fact, we say it all the time. Quote, the government is not on trial here. And yet, of course, it always is. The truth is simple. The criminal justice system in any society necessarily implies a moral code. Law and morality are not coextensive, but a significant degree what a society chooses to punish is a proxy for what it deems unacceptable, reprehensible, or immoral. Moreover, the way that a society chooses to enforce its laws, the practices it sanctions, the power it grants, the tools it approves, also reveals the community's moral thinking. Madam Speaker, so what Preet Bharara, very successful, it was indicating that we are entering into a realm of the creation of a moral quicksand. And that the question that arises, whether there is sufficient protection for the whistleblowers that the current legislation provides for. And we are saying, Madam Speaker, from the 4 pieces of legislation, that the reform is necessary. I will only, when you look at the Jamaican model, Madam Speaker, and in the Jamaican model, in an article by on the Gleaner of June 7, 2017, Light on Corruption, Protected Disclosures Act, 2011, Blowing the Whistle on Corruption. The Attorney General says that the Jamaican model was quite persuasive. This is what an article by Dr. Omar Hawthorne. Whistleblowing is the act of exposing unlawful activities of misconduct occurring in a society or organization. Corruption typically takes place behind closed doors. Therefore, encouraging individuals who may have information to speak up while creating and facilitating a safe environment for them to do so are foundational to an effective anti-corruption network. The practice of whistleblowing should be institutionalized and destigmatized while ensuring adequate protection for whistleblowers. Jamaica Protected Disclosures Act 2011 is among the best written legislation in the world pertaining to whistleblowing, but the lack of regulation on the procedures and implementation might be a pivotal factor in the lack of reported cases to the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption. So your best model, the model in which you anchor our legislation, is without regulation. And I ask the question again, where is the legislation? Where is the regulation? Madam Speaker, Jamaica has long had an informer feed dead culture. The proverbial see blind and hear, see and blind, deaf and hear. In essence, pay attention to your own business and not meddling in another person's affairs is adhered to. Consequently, in Jamaica, this legislation, in order to gain traction, needs significantly more than a passing of the legislation. And then they went and they outlined, Madam Speaker, a series of reforms required for the Jamaica legislation. So I want to ask the Honorable Attorney General, why it is you bring half-baked legislation before us? You take the model or you take the old model? You know, this is a kind of foreign use. A foreign use approach, Madam Speaker. You could buy a brand new car with all the improvements, but the Attorney General went and get a foreign use to come to this legislation to introduce it into our society. Unacceptable. Similarly, Madam Speaker, similarly. So you understand, whistleblower in Jamaica, drug failings, bullied into silence. This is taken from the Mail Online, May 3rd, 2019. A whistleblower who made public the shocking failings of Jamaica's anti-doping system has been bullied and intimidated into silence by government officials. Then no protection. No protection in the whistleblower legislation. And this is the model you bring. And it goes on, Madam Speaker. When you look at the dance hall and rap culture, informer feed dead is part of it. This same Buju Banton that the Honorable Minister of National Security granted permission to come into Trinidad because of his run-ins with the law previously. Buju Banton has a song, Informer Feed Dead, because there's a whole study done. They take an approach where the dance hall artist takes the gun and kills the snitch, the informer, themselves, Madam Speaker. So that is what you have. So when you get that culture going into the system, the outcome is the level of murder and the cultural ostracizing of people who want to become whistleblowers. So, Madam Speaker, so the law of Malaysia, that to have no retrospectivity. When you look at an article on a reform of and it's entitled, Madam Speaker, A Critical Look into the Whistleblower Protection Act 2010 by Christopher Leong, he's head of the Bar Association, points to 3 areas for reform. And one, the protection for whistleblowers, the level of protection for whistleblowers need to be improved and reinforced. 2, the act still remain vulnerable to ministerial action, and it needs to be made entirely independent of such influence. In our legislation, in all the 21 institutions, bar the Integrity Commission and the one other, you have ministerial, the Ombudsman, you have ministerial direction to all the designated authorities. Unacceptable. This is what they are saying. to bring change. And they're saying, thirdly, Madam Speaker, in this that they conducted, thirdly, a more comprehensive whistleblowing mechanism needs to be created, one that is more robust than the current model, and we based our legislation on the old model, Madam Speaker, the New Zealand, whistleblower, this is dealing with New Zealand legislation, whistleblower law falls short. And they then point out potential areas for reform, and they point out a series of areas for reform, Madam Speaker. This is by the State Services Commission. So what you have, Madam Speaker, is a clear indication that the law that we are seeking to put in place exposes whistleblowers rather than protects them. And that therefore, the Honorable Attorney General, in truncating the Joint Select Committee, did not give this Parliament and the country the opportunity for updated legislation relevant to the context and culture in our society. Madam Speaker, now I want to deal also with this question of culture. Madam Speaker, I think the members who spoke before me raised the issue of Jean Miles. Jean Miles. Madam Speaker, Jean Miles, Jean Miles is very much like the designated icon for whistleblowing in Trinidad and Tobago long before the legislation. Jean Miles, in an article dated I don't have the date, Madam Speaker, but I'll provide the date. It is entitled Jean Miles, the Commissioner, and deals with the Commission of Inquiry. So this is the first Commission of Inquiry in which the PNM government had the opportunity to prevail over. And in this testimony to the Commission, Jean Miles used her position as a clerical officer to name and accuse senior officials in the department of the senior factory inspector of wrongdoing. And go on, and the Commission vindicated her position. But, Madam Speaker, and this is taken from the article, aftermath of the Commission. Shortly after the Commission started sitting, Jean and her mother were robbed at gunpoint by 2 men, but were not harmed. She was also alleged to have received abusive phone calls. Her personal campaign to have the report of the Commission published resulted in her becoming the subject of vicious slander. She was dismissed from the public service without benefits. According to Rafiq Shah, Miles had been conducting an affair with a senior government official, stating that not even her relationship with the notorious Johnny O'Halloran could save her from the might of the PNM, end of quote. And that she died a virtual vagrant, pauperized and made an outcast by the same Williams who had attacked corruption with full force before he came to power. Madam Speaker, the former president of this country and former Prime Minister, A.N.R. Robinson, in his work...
Original speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes to complete your contribution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Caribbean Man by A.N.R. Robinson at page 259 stated, "For a long time, the population had been tremendously concerned about the report of the Commission inquiry into gas stations. This report discloses malpractices of many kinds, including the wrongful obtaining of licenses, the purchase of licenses, but curiously enough, you will remember no one was brought to justice. The principal personality who generated the disclosures which gave rise to the report suffered a pitiful death, while the names of persons who have been mentioned in the report as engaging in corrupt practices can be found in high positions in government, in the National Petroleum Company, and so on. It is so incredible. The person who discloses is repressed and suppressed and penalized, and the people who are engaged in corrupt practices and criminal activities are always on the top. How does it happen? It is not by accident. So that is the DNA coming forward. That is the cultural framework within which we operate. And this approach, Madam Speaker, that is the culture of our country. That is the nature and culture of our country. This is an attempt to make an intervention, to deal with matters of that nature. But, Madam Speaker, it is clear that that the cultural aspect of this is simply our society is not facilitative like that. The smallness of the society. In Malta, Madam Speaker, they said that the smallness of the society precludes an effective whistleblower program. And the Honorable Member for Lavantil West spoke at length about the Dolce. But that was done under Mr. Pandey as Prime Minister and Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj on the UNC. About 4 times he mentioned that, Madam Speaker, not recognizing that is what transpired in those days. The question is that whether there is now an intervention through the politics to change the culture of this country. Madam Speaker, it is clear that in this society today, that there's a lack of mutual tolerance, that we have lack of institutional forbearance, that there's bipartisan politics, and there's mutual distrust in the society. There is currently reform and updating of all the legislation, but we come with the old one, Madam Speaker. We did not take the benefit of the experience of the other countries. Madam Speaker, so in this context, how now do you deal with the culture of this country? How do you deal with that? You see legislation. I think the Honourable Member for Maruga Tableland talked about the seatbelts and seatbelts dealing with that. You know, Madam Speaker. But today, you know, Madam Speaker, I spoke about flow rider, but you also have to take into context the culture of our country, material. You know, Madonna said, it is a material world, and she's a material girl. And that therefore it is the one with the bling, 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 and the cash, 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 and so on. So that what you have are 2 models of whistleblower legislation. The anti-retaliatory model that is before us, and also then you have the incentive model. Madam Speaker, and in a book entitled The New Whistleblower's Handbook, very recent edition, Madam Speaker, by Stephen Martin Cohen, Esquire, this is what he had to say. Today, at page 11, at page 1, today, 2 very different systems governing whistleblowing coexist. One system is made up of old whistleblower laws based on an anti-retaliation model. That's what we have. This is what is before us in 2018, 2019. The whistleblower raises a concern. The boss knows who the whistleblower is. The whistleblower is fired. The anti-retaliation law kicks in, and the whistleblower can challenge the termination in court or before an agency. The whistleblower is paid compensation commensurate with the damages suffered. These cases are the focus of public attention and so on. And the second model. The second model, Madam Speaker, the new whistleblower laws are reward-based. You obtain compensation used to hold wrongdoers accountable. The focus is on using whistleblower insider status to uncover hidden frauds. By protecting a whistleblower's identity, he or she can remain on the job and continue to assist in investigations. Compensation is based on being right, and then went on to reiterate a series of laws in the American system. So, Madam Speaker, so we're behind time. We're behind time. This is the experience, a material world. It is not altruism. The Jamaicans have come to that position now. The Malaysian, only 0.03%, based on the same old legislation that we have modeled ours on. That you do not have that, you do not have an effective whistleblower program, and whistleblower legislation on the basis of the old model. So, Honorable Attorney General, do the right thing. Take it back to a joint select committee, bring it before the Parliament subsequent to that, and look at, and to say that it is simply unacceptable. What you're going to have, in the contribution, Madam Speaker, the Joint Select Committee, the police told the then Joint Select Committee existing that they would prefer anonymous tip, anonymous whistleblowers, because in this culture of murder in our society, that it is better to have anonymous. We not protected anonymous. This protected disclosure and this lack of confidentiality. Madam Speaker, Terence Farrell, in his book, The Underachieving Society, talks about the networking that takes place, speak about the fact that rules and enforcement of rules are irrelevant once you have your network, and that the transactional costs associated with that. So you understand the culture we have here. We understand that there's no regulation. We understand that there is a culture in which you do not trust the government and you do not trust authorities. But, Madam Speaker, we have to engage in this country in an exercise to create a multi-ethnic democracy. And that therefore, when we do so, that on the basis of equality, social and political equality, and not the dominance and of one ethnic group and the subordination of another. This is a work in progress, Madam Speaker. This piece of legislation, to my mind, on the basis of the retrospectivity, the fact that it appears to be ad hominem for a particular situation, although it is legally not ad hominem, but that is a matter for the courts otherwise. The fact that there's no cultural underpinning to support this legislation, but there is an imposition from the top. And therefore, what we are saying to the Honorable Attorney General, that this is not a question of that you must have this piece of legislation in its current form. Where is the patience? If we want to get it right, if you want to have access to the votes of the opposition, instead of utilizing the opportunity for demonizing and putting out an agenda, a political agenda, then let us have good law. Look, I sit in a joint select committee. We have sight of the regulations. We have sight of the regulations, and we have expertise analyzing the regulations, so that therefore we are guided. Honorable Attorney General, at what stage is the regulations for this whistleblower legislation in? I am certain that there is no regulations existing now, but you come and that will affect the procedures. Section 28, 29. Section 28 and 29, coming close, 28 and 29 deals with the question of the regulation and ministerial power. So there's ministerial overreach in the model, because there's ministerial interference, not directly, but through the process in the 21 designated authority units. The minister can intervene. Almost all in state agencies and so on, the minister can give directions. So if you're given directions, there is effectively political interference. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable. So, Madam Speaker, it is clear that what is happening, there's a lack of social capital in the country. There's a lack of trust. There's mutual distrust. There is a lack of tolerance. The tone at the top is not a tone that is appropriate in a multi-ethnic society. And we therefore call upon this government, withdraw this legislation and come back with appropriate legislation for Trinidad and Tobago, and you'll have the support of the opposition. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Naprima. Member for Naprima.
I give way to my colleague, Madam Speaker. Can I?
Member for La Hokata Talparo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is it pressure I rise to support this whistleblower protection bill? Madam Speaker, I don't want to blow the whistle of the member for Shogunaswest. I leave it for the easy to do that. But this bill is absolutely necessary for a country like ours. Before I remember the contribution of a member for Tabakit, where he spoke about values, and the member for Shogunaswest spoke about changing the country. I think we need to change the way we approach legislation, the way we approach these things. Now, I support this bill wholeheartedly because I spent, like the member for Oakridge East spoke about having experience in whistleblower. I spent my entire career dealing with whistleblowers as a journalist. And I have been subjected to detrimental action by members opposite as a result of that. I'll get to that later. I'll get it. 2 weeks ago, a member, one of my constituents came to me to speak about a matter in the public interest. And I told her I will refer her to the Commissioner of Police. She said she didn't want to speak to the Commissioner because he was associated with members opposite and she doesn't trust him. Member for Shogunas West.
Member for La Hokata Talparo. You know, I'm not certain you want to go that way. It's imputing improper motives. I really won't allow you to go that way.
I'm just saying that, Madam Speaker, because the police is the designated authority under this bill.
Maybe you might want to, approach it in a different way, but as you're going, I will not allow it. It's imputing improper motives against members here. Please.
I assure her that I had total faith in the Commissioner, with whom I was meeting with the next day, and he was a man to be trusted, an honorable man. And to reassure her, because of a lack of faith in the members opposite, Shogunaswest spoke about the lack of...
Member for La Hokata Talparo. Again, I really would like to caution that you redirect the course of your contribution. Please.
Thank you for your direction, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm being disturbed by Member for Oakridge East. The point I wanted to make was that I've had tremendous experience dealing with whistleblowers. And this bill treats with those concerns that I have and my own experience treating with whistleblowers. In 2011, a whistleblower came to me as a journalist to provide information which I published in the Mirror. And as a result of that, I was subjected to detrimental acts done by members opposite. And
Member for La Hokata Talparo, you may have suffered detrimental consequences. I think you should leave it as that and press on, rather than imputing improper motives against any member here. Please.
Madam Speaker, I want to act within the spirit of Clause 7 of this bill. I wanted to refer to a letter I wrote to the Integrity Commission, which took up the matter, but I'll leave it for the minute. The fact of the matter is, I think we are not changing the culture if we refer to whistleblowers as snitches and rats, as the member for Shogunas West did. You know, I think we could talk about patriots, not snitches and rats, and informer of the dead, and he's using a Jamaican expression right now when we have a high-profile matter involving a Jamaican national that's engaging the...
Member for La Hokata Talparo, it is now 4:30. Members, I think we will take the suspension now. We will resume at 5 p.m.